everyone, and welcome back to Experience Italy with Friends. Today's episode is inspired by the fact that we now live in the heart of wine country. Wine is the foundation and essence of Montepulciano, and quite honestly, it is an integral part of the Italian lifestyle across the country. After all, it's produced in all 20 regions. Today's episode is special in that we have our first guest speaker, Alfonso Aiello, an expert and distributor of Italian wines. We'll talk about everything you need to know to fully experience Italy's wine culture, including an overview of Italy's wines, the ins and outs of wine tastings, how to choose a winery, and tips to discover your favorite Italian wine. Let's talk about vino. Andiamo! Experience Italy with Friends is a travel and lifestyle podcast where we will explore our favorite destinations and hidden gems, share key travel tips and cultural insights, and provide real-time updates about our move to this remarkable country. Join me, Tanya Razzo, an Italian travel expert and founder of Amici Vacations, and my Italian husband and producer, Davide Razzo, on a journey that is sure to inspire you and prepare you to create immersive and authentic experiences of your own in the beautiful country of Italy. Hello again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and a warm welcome to any new listeners. I'm your host, Tanya, and I'm here with my husband, co-host, and producer, Davide.
Ciao, amici.
I'm so excited for today's episode. First, it's all about wine, one of our favorite things. And secondly, we have our first guest speaker.
Yes, I'm really excited as well. We thought we could change things up a little bit and get a little help from our amici. We are thrilled that Alfonso Aiello, sales manager with wine merchants in Minneapolis, joins us.
I'm so excited. Before we dive in, though, let's provide a quick update on life in Montepulciano.
It still feels surreal that we live here.
You know, I agree. We are so fortunate. I mean, just today I was out on a walk and it's a gorgeous day here, blue skies, and the vineyards are starting to green up and the trees are blossoming. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I got on my bike for the second time and it was beautiful. So what have we been up to since our last episode?
Well, we experienced another first. We were guest speakers on another podcast called A New Life in Italy, which was released last week. It was so much fun to chat with Sam about our journey to Italy, our motivation to move here prior to retiring, and how we've established ourselves.
It was a lot of fun. And if anyone is considering moving to Italy, we highly recommend listening to A New Life in Italy podcast. And also check out Smart Move Italy. They were a huge help to us.
We'll be sure to provide links in the episode resource section. Be sure to check them out.
Awesome.
Our next big activity was more unpacking and putting a lot of furniture together. We're getting really good at reading those instructions.
Even you have done some and finished them without screwing up.
Haha. I think it's kind of fun, actually, like adult Legos, to be honest.
And finally, we went to another wine event. This was a small dinner event in a neighboring town of Sinalunga, where 5 wineries participated in a blind tasting.
You know, it was so much fun. I've never done a blind tasting, I don't think, in all of our different wine tasting experiences. So to have 5 glasses in front of us and have to guess which winery it belonged to was kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, we had 5 different Vino Nobile, and they were from different vintages too. So, and we were invited by one of the producers, the wine producer's friends, and we had to guess his wine, which we love. And
I did it.
You did it, yes. I kind of was like, yeah, but I got a lot of hints, and so, but all the others were great too. So.
Yeah, they're all fabulous wines, but I knew my favorite and I was right. Pretty proud of myself.
Okay. Awesome.
Well, it's probably not surprising why we were inspired to dedicate an episode to wine. I mean, we've been mentioning it a lot in our prior episodes, and we've been drinking a lot of it since we arrived in Italy. I actually encouraged Davide to record today's episode in the evening so we could enjoy a glass while we record.
So do you know what you're drinking?
I know that it's red and it's good.
You're drinking a Bulgari, and I actually opened up now a bottle of Rosso di Montepulciano.
They're all
So,
good.
yeah.
But in all seriousness, wine, or vino as it's called here, is at the center of life in Montepulciano, and really it's at the heart of Italian culture across the country. As I said, it's produced in all 20 regions, and every region takes a lot of pride in their varietals, and each is renowned for their excellence and craftsmanship. To quote wineintelligence.com, in essence, wine is more than just a drink in Italy. It's a reflection of the nation's soul, uniting people across generations in a shared appreciation for quality, tradition, and togetherness. When I saw this, I was like, exactly. Like, it really captures wine culture in Italy, where it is just part of life and everybody loves their wine and thinks their wine is the best.
What did you say the other day, that wine is more essential than water in Italy, or what? What was the quote?
Well, to be honest, I said, I think what I said was that wine was to be trusted more than water in the past, because water can become contaminated and wine stays pure. So in many cases, it was more important than water.
Drink more wine, I guess. Anyway, we've been enjoying Italian wines ever since we started coming to Italy together in 1998. Every trip included at least a couple of winery visits and probably a visit to an enoteca or two.
And every trip resulted in a couple of cases being shipped back to the States. We've also enjoyed introducing our friends to Italian wines. We loved hosting wine events back at our home in Minnesota, and our last one was focused on Italy. Every guest had to bring a wine from a different region and give a quick presentation about it to the group. Everyone had a blast and learned a lot too. It was eye-opening just how much wine Italy had to offer, and we created a bunch of new fans. Okay, as we mentioned, we have a guest speaker, Alfonso Aiello, with us today, and together we'll cover everything you need to know to fully experience Italy's wine culture.
But before we introduce Alfonso, we want to provide some background on Italian wines. So, Italy was the largest exporter of wine worldwide, but just got surpassed by France in 2023. And then Spain is third, and the US comes in at fourth place.
I have to be honest, I was a little bit surprised to come across that fact. Like, I knew Italy had a lot of wine, but I wouldn't have thought it was number one and now number two.
Yeah, I thought that they would for sure beat France, but I guess not.
Well, they're kind of tied. But
They go back and forth?
yes.
Oh, okay, cool. So, due to its balmy climate, this Mediterranean nation is home to not just one, but more than 500 grape varieties on over 1.73 million acres. And here are a few of those grape varieties. The largest one is the Sangiovese. Then we have Montepulciano, which is not from the Montepulciano in Tuscany, but it grows in the Abruzzo area, so the Montepulciano Abruzzo. Then we have Merlot. Then we have Trebbiano Toscano, Chardonnay, Barbera, which grows in Piedmont. Then we have the Glera, which they make Prosecco with it. Then we have Pinot Gris. And then Nero d'Avola from Sicily.
That's a lot of wine. Speaking of Sicily, I just learned that recent archaeological exploration discovered that winemaking dates back as far as 4000 BC in Sicily, which that's a really long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, especially during the Roman Empire, the winemaking industry flourished. Romans drank wine with every meal and considered it a staple. This beverage was shared by both rich and poor, freemen and slaves. Romans created some winemaking techniques still in use today, such as barrel aging, which was used to produce more wine at a lower cost. And a little bit of trivia. Pompeii was a winemaking hub in ancient Rome, so much so that the destruction of vineyards during the eruption of Vesuvius caused wine prices to soar.
Wow, I didn't know that. Another fun fact, the average Italian consumes 46.8 liters or 12.36 gallons of wine each year.
I'm wondering if we exceed that average, Davide.
Oh, well, somebody needs to keep that average up. So, okay, so we are getting to the main segment of this episode. I wanted to introduce our first guest speaker on Experience Italy with Friends. He's a wine expert and distributor in the United States. I've met Alfonso and his family when we were going to Rome from Minneapolis in 2003, and then later at the Italian Cultural Center in Minneapolis in 2005, where our kids would meet weekly for their Italian classes. Alfonso works as a sales manager for wine merchants in Minneapolis, which is the fine wine division of the Johnson Brothers. Alfonso is a big soccer fan. He has also played with the greatest footballer in the world, Diego Maradona, when he was a young lad in his native Naples, and is, of course, a big fan of Napoli. Let's welcome Alfonso. Can you please introduce yourself, tell about yourself a little bit?
Yes, good afternoon. I guess in Italy it's afternoon right now, so it's good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Alfonso Aiello. I'm a native of Naples, Italy. I moved to the United States first time I came to the United States was 1987, but I came back in 1990, and then I lived here for 10 years. Then I moved back to Italy for 4, and then I'm back here since 2004. My life has been all about restaurant business, food and wine, education, and I've been doing it for a long time, almost too long, but that's really what I do. And right now, as of today, I run a wholesale company, which is called Wine Merchants. I work for Johnson Brothers, which is the third largest distributor in the United States. Wine Merchants is the fine wine division of Johnson Brothers, and focuses strictly on luxury products or esoteric products like Italian and French and wines from all over the world. So that's what I do every day, and that's the bulk of what I do.
So how did you get into the wine business? You said it started kind of with restaurants and hospitality, but how did you get a passion for wine, or what's your drive behind it?
Well, since I was a little kid, I've always been surrounded by wine. My family was into wine. My dad made wine. My friends made wine. So I grew up into harvest and tasting wine when you're pretty young, and try to, understand that, when you're having a meal, you have a nice glass of wine, not water or Coke or a cocktail. It was a pretty, in Italy, I would say it's a very, at least for my generation, I don't know the new generation, but for my generation, it was a very typical thing to do. That at 5-6 years old, they will give you a little bit of wine to drink. So it was a natural transition. Then I got in the restaurant business, and that the passion grew, because then I started educating myself, and I started understanding that it was other than just house wines that my family drank. There was more a more sophisticated and a romantic part of the wine business. And then I got really interested in that. And after so many years in a restaurant, I got a little tired of working Easter and Christmas, and I didn't really get to spend a lot of time with my family. I ran into this gentleman that was my first boss, and I asked him if, what would he think about hiring me as a sales consultant? And he did. And they gave me my first job in the wine business. And then I became I kind of did all the progression to become a sales manager. And today I'm the one that, decide brands and direct the sales, and it's kind of fun. It's stressful, but it's fun.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, getting back into tasting wine when you're little, and that's really true. I remember the one story about my brother getting drunk when he was 9, and when my uncle in Torino asked us to go downstairs and traverse the wine from the big bottle, I guess, into a smaller bottle.
The Damigiana?
Yeah, the Damigiana. You had to kind of suck on the tube.
Yes.
So we started sucking on that tube, and we got wine, and my brother got really, really drunk on that. So
yeah, that was the job of the little kids. When you were 10, 11 years old, they will send you fill up the bottles when they finished at the table. And if you didn't know how to shuffle the tube, you would go right through your throat, and then it was a feeling that you didn't forget for a while.
Yeah, I know.
It burned your throat really, but it was fun. Again, it was a natural transaction, listening to your parents talking about wine, to my dad and my uncle and my grandfather. fighting about which one made the best wine, which one they thought it was the best wine, which I think those wines were horrible, to be honest with you, but they thought they were the best wines that they have ever drunk. So it's like, it was kind of funny.
It's my dad has been making wine now for the last 3 or 4 years. And I think this year I can say that he finally figured it out.
He did. It's really good wine. I have to give it to him. That whatever he did differently this year hit the mark.
Yeah.
Well, they got more tools right now to make better wines. Like when you were making wines in the 70s, they were, the fermentation was warm. And so the wine would just be bad, like you need to have like a cold stabilization of the grapes, and they weren't able to accomplish that because, you were making wine when it was 95 degrees outside. And yes, the fermentation started naturally because the heat got the yeast going, but there wasn't a lot of other tools. And then these wines were basically boiling and cooking into these cement vats. And there was I couldn't imagine those wines being, it's the same way, if you go back historically, the Etruscan were the first population in Italy that made wine in Tuscany years ago. When they say that, it's like, yeah, they made wine, but what kind of wine did they make? Was it really tasting good? Probably not.
Probably not. But
I love the conversation we're having here about a little bit about the wine culture. So maybe let's just dive into that a little bit more now. And we often, and I think as you just mentioned, Alfonso, is having wine with a meal. And when I talk with others, that's a key point that I make is wine is part of the meal here in Italy. It goes with the food. And it's rare that an Italian will just order wine and sit around and sip it. And I think we do that in the US. So I guess from your point of view, how would you also describe the differences in Italian wine culture versus US wine culture?
The American wine culture is pretty young. They're if you're thinking about it, they had the prohibition, in the 50s, 40s, I believe here. So people they were making wine or contraband, but I think people really culturally didn't really start drinking wine here until the early 90s. When I'm talking about the massive public, you had the travelers or the rich people that probably had the opportunity to travel around the world and drink Bordeaux and Burgundy, and Amarone at the time was very popular as an Italian wine, Barolo, Barbaresco, but not many people really, I would say 1%, maybe even less than 1% of the population. The mass that started really, think about it, 25 years ago, people were drinking Carlo Rossi in a jug here, 5-liter jug, and now they're drinking $100 bottle of Cabernet. So the progression has happened pretty fast. And I think also that California, especially California and Oregon, even younger than that, they have they didn't really figure out where varietal grew. They were planting everything everywhere. While in Italy, that does not happen. Like you don't plant Nebbiolo in Tuscany or Sangiovese in Piedmont. So we historically understand in Italy where the grapes are planted. You don't plant Aglianico from Campania in Piedmont. You just stick with what you're good at. And I think, out of the 21 regions in Italy, everyone produces wine. Every region produces wine. And every wine is produced for the food that they cook. So I think that's like, and every one of them thinks that they make the best wine. So if you go to even Valle d'Aosta, which is kind of a small region, almost in France, they tell you that their wines are the best wines that they make in Italy, and they're very proud. There's a pride. There is a culture here. It's kind of new, and also in Italy we don't follow trends or fads like they do here. Like here you could see this is the first generation in the United States that has not been trained on wine. So there was Bartels and James, there was White Zinfandel, there was Riesling. That's how people got into the wine in the United States. Now these kids are drinking High Noon, and they're drinking Truly, and they're drinking, these seltzers. And so I'm a little concerned about how do we train this younger generation to drink wine in the United States. In Italy, it's hard to change. You walk into a piazza right now in Italy, there is probably 600 spritz going on amongst the young guys, and so that's how they start drinking wine in Italy, even if it's not a high alcohol. But I don't know if it makes sense what I just said.
No, it totally does. Thank you.
You mentioned it. Italy has 20 regions, and 20 regions have their own wine. So I made a rule for myself when I travel to a region, I want to try a local wine. Okay, so said that, can you describe a little bit what an Italian wine tastes like in general, like compared to what we find in the US?
Well, I think that more than the taste, I would say, like, like people have, like I said, because United States is a young country. When it comes up to wine drinking, there's a lot of experimentation. Like for a long time, when they first started following the Bordeaux trend, they thought the wine needed to be really oaky. So they fill this Cabernet and Chardonnay with like huge oak, and you drink, basically you were sucking on a piece of wood when you're drinking one of those wines. Now they're starting to realize that people really don't want, because they had the mentality here that people like to age wine. How do we age wine? So the more oak we had, the longer the wine will last. Which was not true. In Italy, I think that oak is just an ingredient into the wine. It's not the main thing into the wine. I think that the wine needs to age, but there's a lot of aging in bottle. Which if you go to Barolo, if you go to Barbaresco, they can, as long as they age it for so long, they can choose how to age it. It could be sitting in a bottle. It could be sitting in a neutral barrel. It could be sitting in anything, as long as it's not sold. That's what the DOCG. We'll talk a little bit later about it.
Yeah.
That's what requires. If you think about it, they were planting Pinot Grigio in Napa, so something that cost $750,000 an acre in Napa Valley, they were planting Pinot Grigio. So it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. But in the last 20 years, they discovered that Cabernet is supposed to be planted in Napa and Chardonnay. Those are the two varietals that really go. And they moved other varietal in other areas where land is less expensive. So they're still learning. It's a learning process. I think the American wines got much better in the last 10, 15 years. I think that, but Italian wines have there are bad wines in Italy too. It's not like in Italy, everything is a good wine. But in Italy, for example, here, what happens in the United States is corporations started getting into the wine business, like the Constellation of the world and the Diageo of the world. They start buying wineries, and they don't really love wine. They just want to sell boxes. The quality is not really the most important thing. When it comes up to Italy, instead, you still have a lot of family that own the winery. So this is basically, when you talk to an Italian winemaker, and I have a lot of friends of mine that, around winery, after so many years in the business, you meet and become friends with a lot of people. They tell you that they're basically, they're just somebody that's navigating the business from one generation to another.
Yeah.
So they don't have to screw it up. So their job is not to, if you're a Brunello producer, or you're a Chianti Classico producer or a Barolo producer, you cannot change what your family was doing. It's just, it will be you would probably, it wouldn't go well, and you probably couldn't live with yourself if you do it. Yeah. So there's the installed culture of keeping the tradition going, and maybe changing a little bit, maybe evolving a little bit of tradition, but not going to the extreme. There is a reason why Brunello di Montalcino has been 100% Sangiovese Grosso for the last 150 years. There's a reason why Barolo has been 100% Nebbiolo, and there's no screwing up. You may be changing a little bit of stuff into the fermentation or the way you make the wine, but the fundamentals are there, and that's really what keeps the difference between. Here there's a lot more blending, a lot more, people are trying to experiment. Some people want to do French varietals, and people want to do, think about it. California was the first country, the United States and California specifically, was the first country that put varietal on a label. So United States 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people thought that Cabernet was invented in California. They didn't realize that in Bordeaux, they've been drinking Cabernet for 300 years. So it's that's how culturally behind some people are, because the United States were the first people to put Cabernet on a label to say this is a Cabernet. And people didn't understand what Bordeaux was. They didn't know that the blend of Bordeaux is Cabernet, Merlot, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc. And Malbec, those are the five blend from the Bordeaux region, but people had no idea. Or people drink Malbec and they look, Malbec was invented in Argentina. Well, not really. Yeah. Malbec exists for centuries. It's just that.
Well, speaking of varietals, Alfonso, maybe let's jump in and help do some translation for the Americans who are wine lovers. And I feel like most people have, if you say, what wines do you like? They're like, well, I like lighter reds. I'm like, I only can do Pinot, or I'm really big into full-bodied cabs and Zinfandels, or I have many people who are saying, oh, I only like light, white wines, but they got to be sweet. And others are, oh no, I'm only into dry Sauv Blanc. So help make some of those like conversions for like the major categories. If I'm a Pinot Noir lover, what would I like in Italy?
Well, Pinot Noir, and when people ask me like, how do you, what do you? Because even working in Italian restaurants in the United States, people always ask me like, I like Merlot. What do you like from Italy? It's always it's a tough things to really stay close to. I would just say varietal wise, I would say that Pinot Noir is very similar to Sangiovese. The way they ferment, they're very light skin, light color, high acidity. But just already Pinot Noir from Oregon versus Pinot Noir from California are two different wines.
Yes.
So even Pinot Noir, even when you try Sangiovese is a different wine. So you have a Sangiovese from Sangiovese Grosso from the Montalcino area. You have the Morellino di Scansano. You have the Brugnolo Gentile from the area where you guys are staying right now. That it's stylistically it's done by the soil. Like for example, in the south part of Tuscany, the Sangiovese is a lot more fruity because the soil is a little more fertile versus the Sangiovese in the Chianti Classico area. That's limestone and rocky, the Galestro, the Alberese, the rocks that are in the soil. They make a much more mineral wine, a lot more clove, a lot more spicy. If you want to get into the Cabernet, for example, when people want a glass of Cabernet, I think the reason why Super Tuscan were invented, like if you put a glass of Sangiovese and you put a Super Tuscan next to a white piece of paper, you could see the darkness of the Super Tuscans because there's Cabernet or Merlot blended into the wine. So I think if somebody wants, that does change the Sangiovese, the Cabernet, even 5-10% of Cabernet, make the Sangiovese a lot more pungent. And so that's why those wines were really invented. When people say it's Barolo like Cabernet, I'm like, no, absolutely not. Is Barolo like Merlot? No, they're completely different wines, stylistically. Cabernet, it's a monothematic. I always tell the story that Cabernet, the story that Angelo Gaia, which, I represented, is in the family, I'm friend of family. Angelo Gaia is one of the best producers in Italy. He used to tell me, he said Cabernet is like John Wayne, He's always like tough, he's got the tough face, but, and he said like Nebbiolo, which is the Italian varietal, it's like Marcello Mastroianni. He said his hairs are always kind of messy. He's a little bit all over the place, but at the end of the day, he ends up with Sophia Loren. So it's kind of like that story, like that.
I love
John
that.
Wayne may be tough. John Wayne may be tough, but the people are looking for more sophisticated things, and I think Nebbiolo is more of a sophisticated grape, a little more intriguing. So it's that's kind of like what I think the differences are in varietal. Like people have to try. People just have to be courageous and give it a try and see, okay, why is these people recommending me this? Or
Or what about a Brunello? I feel like, as we're here in Tuscany, the difference, as we're here in Montepulciano and we talked about Chianti and it's, then you have Montalcino, it's all Sangiovese, but the Brunello is definitely, a more earthy, bolder wine. And I would compare it more to like a very bold cab in many ways, or maybe even a Zinfandel that has like a,
well, the color,
to
if you look at the color of Brunello, as almost like that orangey edge, it's the Sangiovese aged, when you're aging. So Sangiovese is a different clone, like Brunello is a different clone than the Chianti Sangiovese. So in Montalcino, they use Sangiovese Grosso, which is a different clone of Sangiovese. Also, if you're looking at Montalcino, there's probably 130 wineries in all Montalcino. Now, at the beginning, there were probably 30, 40. Now people are, they're starting to grow. But the supply and demand in Montalcino, because they are some of the popular, the production is very small there, versus Chianti goes all the way from Florence to Siena. But, there are some Chianti Classico that I agree with you that I compare to Brunellos. There are some Chianti Classico that are as good as Brunellos for half of the price. Brunello, I think it's tough to pair. It's a Sangiovese, but I would just say more of a Pinot Noir, like a high-end Pinot Noir. Like a Brunello is more like a Burgundy or a high-end Pinot Noir or really well-made Pinot Noir. I would just compare that to Brunello. But again, it's the aging. Brunello ages for a while versus Chianti Classico does not. Like Brunello ages for 3 years before it gets released. Like Chianti Classico can age for like a year, unless it's a Reserva for 18 months. So people typically that drink a Cabernet, like you're right, Tanya, people that drink a Cabernet that spend $70, $80 on a bottle of Cabernet, they will not have any problem trying a Brunello. These people know already what the good wines are. So when they come to Italy, those are the people that probably drink the Brunello.
Yeah.
The people that spend $10 on a bottle of wine here, they're probably going to be happy with the Vino della Tavola, the restaurant one. And they're going to say, oh my God, this is the best wine I've ever tried in my life. And it was tasting so good. And
yeah, no, I've seen kind of all extremes. I've had clients come and, are like, I enjoy wine, but it's not a huge thing for me. And then I have the other extreme where they're coming here only for the wine and the food, and then saying, oh, while I'm there, I should see some of Italy and bring me to the great places. So there is definitely the foodies and those into it, and those who are more here for the experience and wanting to get introduced to the wines and appreciate it. And so I think introducing it to them is very fun. And I usually incorporate a wine experience, at least one or two, into, a client's trip, and preparing them to go and doing a wine tasting is, part of also what we want to bring into the episode here. And as they go to a wine tasting, I'm reflecting on the ones I've been to just recently, and immediately they're like, well, this one's a DOCG and this one's a DOC. And then we have an IGT, and no, but you should try the Reserva. So maybe let's segue into a little bit of like these terms and labels and what does that mean? And when people hear that, like, are some better quality, or what does that mean from a price point?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that, people, I did an event on Thursday night in Duluth at this country club, and this lady asked me about it. What's the sticker around the bottle, right? The
DOC.
And I explain her, so if you're thinking about denomination, because that's at the end of the day what it is, the denomination in Italy has always existed. There are traces of the denomination since like 1100. You could see this noble family like the counts, the marquises, the dukes. They were denominating their area. They were saying, this is Duke Bonacossi area. Yeah. That's the denomination. When it got really serious, I think the first wine, if I remember well, the first wine that really requested a DOC was in actually DOC was born before DOCG. DOC was born in 1963. And I believe the first one that they asked for a DOC, like an area, was Vernaccia. They were the first white wine, the first wine that requested that denomination, and the government approved that. So they started with the DOC. Then in 6 years later, I believe in 69, they got the DOCG came out, and was, I believe it was Marsala that requested the DOCG.
Oh, really?
Quality.
I thought that the DOCG was born because there were some scandals about production of Italian wine back in the late 60s or beginning of the 70s. And that's where the G came in then of the DOCG. Maybe you want to say what DOC means and DOCG, and
what's the distinctive difference?
Well, it's just an area, right? So I think the first five original DOCG were Chianti, Barolo, Barbaresco, Brunello, Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. Those were the five original DOCG. Today, there are, if I remember well, there are about 78 DOCG, about 331 DOC, and about 180, I believe, 175, 180. Don't quote me on this. I'm kind of they change every week, so you don't know what area they had. IGT. Mm-hmm. So DOCG and DOC were basically two. The government runs the Italian business, the Italian wine business. So the government basically decides that this area need to. So first of all, to be Chianti, you have to be grown into the Chianti region, which is defined by the denomination. Then the wine has to be produced only, has to be bottled and aged all in the Chianti region. The yield, you can only pick, you have to cut the production you can be making. So there's a lot of rules and regulation. DOC is a little less regulation, right?
Yep.
Then in 1992, I believe, if I remember well, some of these winemakers, they were like, okay, I want to make something a little bit different that doesn't fit into this profile. And some of these big, the lobby obviously came out. You got big names like Tignanello, Sassicaia, you got the Antinori family, the Frescobaldi family, the Gaia family. They have a lot of weight when it comes in the wine, and say, look, I want to change a little bit. I want to blend Barbera into Nebbiolo. I want to blend Cabernet into the Sangiovese. Think about it. For the longest time, the Chianti Classico, until 10 years ago, it was made by 5 varietals, and 2 of them were white, the Trebbiano and the Malvasia.
Yeah.
Today, they are allowing Cabernet, they are allowing Syrah, they are allowing Merlot, so they are allowing international varietal into the Chianti Classico. So they changed, they made some progress. But at the end of the day, I think that these wines, they started making these wines. So the lobbyists, they were like, you know what? We want to make wines, but we can be calling our wines Vino da Tavola, because the third level would have been Vino da Tavola. That's when the IGT became popular.
So they wanted to have fun. They wanted to have some more artistic expression, may I add, and experiment and just, I guess, deviate from all these rules is what you're saying.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So IGT means Indicazione Geografica Tipica, which means that the wine, as long as the wine comes from the region, you can blend whatever you want in it. You can. It's basically like a minestrone soup. You're making. I make the difference is when I speak the difference between DOC, DOCG, and IGT is like DOC and DOCG are like working for a corporate restaurant as a chef. So you got the spec. The food needs to be cooked in a certain way. The plate needs to be looking in certain ways. Versus the how do you call it, the IGT, where the chef can do whatever they want. The chef is free to
throw in whatever's in the kitchen, in the refrigerator.
Yeah, he can be more creative, and that's really what the fun part is.
So Davide, you're an IGT chef, I would say. Yeah. You usually just open up the fridge and say, "What can I make with this?"
As long as the ingredients are coming from that region, though, that's what Indicazione Garantita.
Yeah. So they skip these wineries, and I would say when you just asked me the question before, Tanya, about the quality. So DOCG doesn't mean that's the best wine in Italy, or DOCG doesn't mean that's the best wine in Italy, because if you think about Chianti, it's a perfect example, right? Chianti, doesn't matter if you're a $5 bottle of Chianti or you're a $200 bottle of Chianti, you're still a DOCG. Because as long as you are in the area, you're the DOCG. So I think the best quality wines are IGT, because that's where the winemaker. Well, Brunello is a different story. It's a smaller allocation. Barolo is the same. Barbaresco the same. Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. They are smaller areas that produce great wines. So you're gonna get quality out of Brunello regardless. It's good wine. But Chianti, it's the opposite example, because you can find a really inexpensive Chianti for $5 a bottle, but still has a DOCG. IGT, I think, is where the winemaker really expresses the best of their ability or what they want to make. Think about it. Like if you think about Gaia, talking about Gaia, I don't like to talk about him that much, his name, but I think he's an icon in the wine business. He created an appellation called Langhe, and because he decided to blend Nebbiolo into his Barbera into his single vineyards, which are $300 a bottle. So he blended 5% Barbera to it. And because he's got the weight, they created an appellation for him called Langhe. Because otherwise he would have fallen under, Vino da Tavola or IGT. And that's not, you don't do that to Gaia. You can do that to Gaia. So now it's, and even IGT for him would have sounded like below, is standard. So they had to create that area, Langhe, to be a DOC area at the beginning, and now a DOCG after many years, because who produces wine there. Sometimes the name has a lot of weight. Who is the producer in the area, And if you think that the big names in the Chianti were Rufino, Frescobaldi, those were big family. Antinori, those guys made Chianti Classico, so they. Right.
So getting into quality then, are the terms Reserva, Classico, Superiore, are those then an indication, or what? If DOC and DOCG is not, what are there any labels that say?
Reserva, usually it's depending on the area. Reserva, for a lot of producers, is the best wine that they make. there's two ways of doing a Riserva in Italy. Like in Chianti, for example, a Riserva means that you're aging your wine a little longer. So instead of aging at 12 months in oak, you aging at 18 in oak, and you can call that wine Riserva. I think that the quality, it personally, after so many years in this business, I think the quality comes from the producer,
And that's where I wanted to go into. Like, I think the quality comes from the production itself. Producing a Riserva wine goes more into it. Like, there's selecting grapes from a different area in the vineyard. Or, for example, aging it a little bit longer. And that's why they're more expensive, because there goes a little bit more into it. But I think where I wanted to go with this is the production of the wines in Italy are different than how they're produced in the US. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the main differences? What is done in the US versus in Italy? One I can think of is, irrigation, for example. That's a big one. I think in California they allow irrigation.
In certain areas they do, in certain areas they don't. Like in Italy too, it's like in certain areas they do, in certain areas they don't. Like in Montepulciano, they do not allow irrigation unless it's an emergency, 105 degrees, and you can irrigate a little bit. You can drop some water. I think that right now there isn't a lot of differences in the way, like there is bulk wine in Italy too. If you go to the Trentino area, any area, Campania, any region, the Tuscany, there are wineries that are bulk producing. They're buying juice and they're buying grapes. So I think the wine business is divided in two parts. There is the people that are doing it to make money, and there are people that are doing it for passion and because they carry the family legacy. So the people that are there to make money, they throw everything they can into a bottle, whatever they can buy, whatever juice. Just give you an example. There are brands that are very, very popular in Italy right now. They probably buy 70% of their grapes or 80% of their grapes. So it's good contracts, it's good, but at the end of the day, their goal is to sell massive amount of wine. When you're thinking about Montepulciano, when you're thinking about Barolo, right? You're talking about 6,000 acres. You're talking about 1,000 acres. Quality right there has to be good. Yeah. You can't be screwing it up. So when there was the scandal, talking about scandal, when there was a scandal in Montepulciano a few years ago, 15 years ago now, I don't remember now, like COVID has really made me lose the track of time. I think there was some big families involved. So the interesting thing about when the government runs the business is the fact that the government, for example, every year they know exactly how much Brunello di Montepulciano is produced between the good year and between a bad year. So it ranges between 300,000 bottles and 500,000 bottles. Well, one year there were 750,000 bottles of Brunello going out, right? So the government is like, where are the extra 250,000 bottles coming from? So what they do, and it's a very serious business, they send inspectors into the winery to taste the wine. And they realized that they were blending Cabernet Merlot into the Sangiovese in Montepulciano. That's where all of a sudden, like the government is like, okay, time out, you cannot do that. So, the big names, they come out and say, I think it's a better wine if we blend Cabernet. The guy's like, we're not bending the rule just for you. So what they had to do with that wine, they had to declassify it. So you can call it Rosso Toscano, and instead of charging $75 a bottle, you're charging $20 a bottle. Yeah. So you're probably drinking pretty good juice for $20, but it's, again, the areas that are smaller, when I say the producer, I mean, like, for example, if I drink a wine from a specific producer in Piedmont, right? The Conterno, the Gaia, the Cavallotto, these big names, you know that their wine is going to be good. Doesn't matter what year it is. They don't produce bad wine. Yeah. If there is a bad year, they don't make wine. Yeah. If you're trying wine for other people, like, generic brands, they may even make a wine in like a year where the wine doesn't supposed to be made. Like 2000, it was 2003, I believe, there was the big heat wave that killed 5,000 people. Some producers were still making wine. It tasted like cooked, peaches or cooked apricots or cooked like for a white wine, or you look like like plums for red wine.
Out. But
they decided to make it. So that's the credibility.
Because when we were in Montalcino, we were asking one of the producers, why is this vineyard empty? And he was explaining to him that I cannot put more vines here or grow more vines here because I planted them over there, and the government is restricting us to plant more. So that's where the government comes in. It's like you said, is that they know exactly.
It's very serious. I seen them multiple times when I was at wineries that the inspection from the government comes in, and the guy just spends like 4 or 5 hours in there going barrel per barrel, making sure that you're not, because if you see on the top of the barrel, they have the they call it the angel share, like the evaporation, and they control where the evaporation is. If you had more stuff, like if your evaporation comes down and all of a sudden they see the tank full again, they're like, okay, what's going on here? Why is your tank full? Who filled it up? Because those tanks are registered. Once you sign what you want to make, once you say this is going to be Brunello, it starts as potentially Brunello. That's what they write. This is potentially going to be Brunello. Then eventually, next 6 months later, they say potentially still Brunello. And then maybe a year later, they decide like, this isn't good enough for Brunello. It's going to become Rosso di Montalcino.
Yeah. Kind of adding on that, one of the things I want to get into when you're talking about production, and I think this is really good to talk about the big producers, small producers, and, their dedication to being a higher quality or not. But we also hear a ton about just the organic and also like their commitment to not add any additives or additions to the wine. And then always the question or comment of like, why don't I get headaches when I drink Italian wine? I get headaches when I drink American wine. So maybe, can you talk a little bit about the differences of how they make the wine in their, organic? And I don't know if that's always been organic, and now it's just a modern term that we like to throw out there to make it seem higher quality.
That's a good point. I was talking to a lady a couple of nights ago. I don't think people get a headache because the additive in the wine. I think they get a headache because of the type of wine they're drinking. Like, for example, if you're drinking a high tannic wine, your green or the green, like a young wine that has green phenolics that causes you that headache to come. So the organic. There's multiple ways of making wine right now. There's people that continue using pesticides, but I would say out of the top producers right now, people that are serious about wine, at minimum, they are sustainable. Sustainable means like a step below organic. The organic doesn't really, obviously the pesticides are not good for wine, but I think the organic and the biodynamic, which is also the crazy way of making wine, which is, burying the horn, using a calendar of drinking wine, for tasting wine. These people are really extreme. But I would say in Italy, we have always used organic practices for a long time. In the United States, probably not. In the United States, they use a lot of pesticide at the beginning. But now I say that, like I said before, the United States has improved a lot in the winemaking because, what they do, first of all, before they wasn't traveling, right? So these winemakers weren't talking to each other. They were kind of like, American winemaker learned at UC Davis how to make wine, and then they made it the same way. Everybody made it the same way. Then with the traveling, the interns, you got interns coming from Italy, you got interns coming from France, Bordeaux, Burgundy, Barolo. So they come to the United States and they kind of show them, or they travel. If I'm a owner of a good winery, I probably pay for my winemaker to go do a stage in Barolo, a stage in Barbaresco, a stage in Burgundy. So that part has improved tremendously in the last 20 years. I think the headache is because if you don't drink red wine, it's like training, right? It's like if you don't run and all of a sudden you're running 5 miles and you come home and you're like, my legs hurt. If you're not used to drink heavy red wine and all of a sudden you get into a heavier red wine, and all of a sudden you may feel like you get a headache. But also the headache, it's due mainly to the thing that preserves the wine, right?
The sulfur.
The sulfites,
right?
Yep.
Sulfites. So there's natural sulfur in wine, regardless if you add it or not. And then there are some people that add more sulfur, but the sulfur is a natural thing in the wine. I think it's a combination of sulfur versus the way the wine, like the skin. What type of ingredients the skin has, tannin, acidity. If you're drinking too much, like like you just said it before, Tanya, if you go to a restaurant and order a glass of Chianti and you're sitting at a bar and sipping a glass of Chianti with no food, I'll get a headache. Because it's really hard to drink by itself. But if you give me a nice steak or you give me an hamburger and then I'll have a glass of Sangiovese, then I'll enjoy it because then the headache doesn't come. And I think people here drink wine by itself too.
Yep.
That's why it also causes people to feel a little bit like weird about it. If you're not drinking the right wine at the bar, all of a sudden you're like, I'm getting a headache tonight, and
well, this has been very educational. I love it. I think I want to get into like more of a personal question of what are your favorite wines? One from your region, Campania. And then do you have a favorite wine in Italy or 3? I don't know.
Well,
how much time do we have?
Well, I think that people always ask me the question, and when I do events and stuff like that, I always get asked, what's your favorite wine, right? And I don't, from my region, for example, I enjoy Greco di Tufo is my favorite wine. It's a white wine, and I don't drink a lot of white wine. I'm not a white wine drinker, but if I open a bottle of Greco di Tufo, I'll enjoy it. I try, if I can grab as much Greco di Tufo as I can, either from the office or if I find it in the store, I always buy it because it's a wine that I want to try, I enjoy, I know who the producers are, I know who the good producers are. What I think when people say what my favorite wine, I think I think wine, it's an experience, right? To me, wine depends on who you're with, what you're doing, what are you eating. It kind of involves a lot. If I say Brunello Montalcino is my favorite wine, or Barolo is my favorite wine, or it's a mood. Wine is a mood. Like, what are you with? I'm with a group of friends and we're drinking a $10 bottle of Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, and that day I think that wine is the best wine I've ever had. It's just kind of it's just the when people score points, they give 90 points or 80 points or 100 points. That's a single. It's not really an objective valuation of the wine. It's your personal evaluation. So I could be tasting the same wine that somebody gave 100 points. I tasted, I'm like, I don't like that wine. It's like, that's not really, it's like a movie, right? So I think there are definitely areas that I respect, especially in Italy. I respect Montalcino, I respect Barolo, but also I respect Taurasi, I respect Manduria, I respect, Valpolicella. There are areas that, you can say, wow, those are the areas that really build the Italian wine business.
Yeah, Sicily was one of the first parts of Italy that had actually produced wine.
Yeah,
the Greek brought their grapes.
It's just it's stylistically what you're looking for more than just the wine, right? It's like I cannot drink Brunello with everything.
Yeah,
I like Brunello for a certain occasion, but I'm not going to open a bottle of Brunello every night just because I like Brunello. So tonight I may open a bottle of Primitivo di Manduria from Puglia because I think that's really what this dish needs. And
so what are you going to open up if Napoli wins today against Inter?
I don't think I'm going to. Tonight I'm going to a movie. I'm going to take a little nap right after the game. I'm tired. I've been driving. I woke up at like 4:30 this morning, and I left Duluth at like 6. I was waiting for a coffee shop to open so I could get a cup of coffee. A pretty crappy cup of coffee, a Caribou coffee. That was the only place open.
Well, Alfonso, this was so much fun, and I want to thank you to come on and to be our first guest.
But thank you guys.
Podcast.
Nice to see you both.
Yeah,
yes,
and we will see you in
a month.
In a month in Naples, in your hometown.
Wow, that was amazing. I'm so glad we had Alfonso join us today, and I am reminded of so many things about why I love this country and I love its wine industry and its passion for wine. It's truly impressive.
Yeah, a lot of technicalities, a lot of good advice and tips. And speaking of tips, here are tips from Tanya. Tips from Tanya.
Okay, as I thought about what you all might need to know to fully experience Italy's wine culture, I came up with a few tips. First, given how integral wine is to the Italian lifestyle, I highly recommend that you be intentional about incorporating a wine experience into your itinerary, whether it be a winery visit, a tasting at an Enoteca wine shop, or during meals at a restaurant. You may think of it as a popular thing to do just in Tuscany, but again, every region produces wine. Sicily, Puglia, and Veneto actually produce more than Tuscany, followed by Emilia-Romagna and Piedmont. Next, when it comes to picking a winery, we have a few tips. First, it's important to me to find wineries that offer great views and experiences in addition to great wines. I mean, good wine is largely a given, so you want either amazing landscapes and views while you're enjoying the wine, a great meal, or impressive architecture and history, like the wine caves we spoke about in Montepulciano.
Yeah, that was very fun.
We tend to prefer smaller, less commercial wineries that are family run. They have a great story and history to share, and their pride and passion come through. The people you meet are personally in the fields at harvest, and the entire operation is a family affair. Our recent favorite is Le Berne here in Montepulciano. I want to give them a shout out because 1, they have amazing wines. 2, it's a beautiful location with a wonderful view from their tasting room. But most importantly, they are a wonderful family that has been so welcoming to us, including us in the wine events around town and keeping us informed. I'll add some additional details to our podcast Facebook group.
Nice. You know, we're going to go do the harvest this fall, right?
I can't wait. But again, some of the larger wineries offer impressive historical estates, so we'll often visit them more for the experience. Argiano is a noteworthy one outside of Montalcino. I mean, these are large villas and castles, so quite the experience. Next, as I mentioned, you don't have to visit a winery to have a wine experience. Enotecas or wine shops are a great place to go for a wine tasting because you get the benefit of many wineries and varietals. The sommelier will start you off with a couple of selections and then offer more depending on your likes and dislikes. And finally, just be sure to enjoy wine with your meals. Ask the waiter for local suggestions or just order the house wine.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. That's like I said in the interview that wherever I go, I always try a local wine.
That's a great thing to do. And so next, if you've picked a winery or an enoteca, here are a few tips about organizing a wine tasting. I often get asked if you need a reservation or if you can just drop in as you pass by a cute winery. Drop-ins sometimes work, but for the most part, I recommend reserving a spot at the winery. Not so much because they are hard to get, but because these wineries are often small operations with the staff playing many roles. You may not find anyone available if you just drop in. Like I said, they could be in the field. They could be down in the cantina. Having said that, you don't necessarily need a reservation far in advance outside of high season, but often the day before or the day of is good enough. Just call ahead. When booking a tasting, know that different experiences are often offered for different fee levels. You can do a tour and a tasting, just a tasting with some food, and some wineries have restaurants and you can have a wine and lunch experience. Just be sure to check out their website in advance and review the options that exist. And I've seen fees range from free to 15 euros to up to 150 euros, depending on the experience and the level of wine. A Brunello wine tasting is going to be more expensive than a Rosso di Montalcino. Wineries, however, will often waive the tasting fee if you purchase a case of wine. Don't be afraid to ask. I asked my wine guide partner about this to confirm that wineries wouldn't be offended if you do ask, and his reply was, they expect you to ask and likely won't offer to do so unless you do. Lastly, as we mentioned before, most wineries can ship to the US. Expect about 100 euros per case. Some will incorporate the fee into the price of the bottle and will offer 2 different price lists. Note that some very small wineries, however, may not have registered with the US FDA, so you won't be able to ship at home. In those situations, we make sure to drink it during our vacation. The last set of tips relate to how to determine which wines you will like. First, I want to say, be sure to try the wines of the region you are in. You know, Davide mentioned this too. Don't be afraid to be adventurous. You may surprise yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've been told, wow, I didn't think I liked reds, or I don't think I liked whites. I don't think I like Chianti, but this is amazing. And, you know, my reply is, well, often it's because you haven't had the opportunity to have such good wine. As we said, Italian producers have a long history and very high quality standards. It's their legacy. And finally, do a little research. I'll include a link to a resource that I really like called Wine Folly. They have wonderful information and provide great insights into each region, as well as provide suggestions such as what you might like if you prefer full-bodied reds, for instance, or a medium-bodied red like a Pinot, or you're a big crisp white fan. They'll help make that comparison from the wines you're used to the wines that you might like here in Italy. So that's all I have for tips in experiencing wine in Italy. I hope you find them helpful.
Wow, Tanya, again, awesome tips, awesome advice as usual. And we are back at the end of an episode.
Yet another one.
Yeah. Thank you once again for listening, and a warm welcome to any new listeners out there. We hope you return for more. Also, please check our Facebook page, Experience Italy with Friends, which is the page dedicated to this podcast, and we will post some more information that we didn't include in the podcast, or maybe you have a question to ask to the community. So,
yes, please check it out, and we hope you enjoyed learning about Italy's wine culture. Be sure to head to your closest wine store and buy a bottle or 2 or 3.
Well, maybe a case.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with another new topic. Ciao, everyone.
Ciao.
We hope you've enjoyed Experience Italy with Friends. If you like the podcast, remember to follow us and leave a review letting us know what you found to be the most helpful. And if you want expert advice or assistance in creating your own immersive and authentic experience in Italy, visit us at www.amicivacations.com.